to talk about pedigrees today, and it's going to be a very short short video, I think. So pedigrees are, you've probably seen them. It looks like this thing down here at the bottom left. Pedigrees show family history concerning genetics. It's kind of an easy way to understand it, intro way to understand it. And on pedigrees, you'll see a bunch of shaded squares or circles. The squares or rectangles, the squares are going to be male, the circles are going to be females. If there's a line between them like this, it means that they are crossing with each other. So like in a family tree, it'd probably be like these two, number 1 and number 2, they are married to each other and they have these 3 kids. So that's how you would read it. So this would be the father, this would be the mother, and the 3 kids are the male and the 2 females. And then this female married a male, and they had kids as well. All right, so let's talk about the shaded. This can change, so it's not set in stone, but generally speaking, if this is, a lot of the ones that we'll practice will be like this. So the shaded has the trait, whatever the trait is. It could be dimples, it could be some kind of disorder, but it's going to be shaded, it's going to be them having the trait. Empty is going to be them not having the trait at all, or even the gene, and half shaded is going to mean that they are a carrier, but they don't show that they have the gene. And in this case, it's assuming, if you see these half shaded ones, it's assuming that they are recessive. So if you see a recessive, if you see a half shaded one, that means that the gene that, or the allele is a recessive gene. And so homozygous dominant, in this case, homozygous dominant would be unaffected. Heterozygous would be a carrier. They're carrying the gene but not showing the gene. And homozygous recessive would be they have or show the trait. So unaffected, carrier, or have or show the trait. Something that we do to organize and to easily communicate which one we're talking about, we would say generation 1, generation 2, generation 3. This is the oldest generation. This is the newest or youngest generation. And then within that generation, there's 1, 2, 3. I've seen some that will do 1, 2, and continue their writing 3, 4, 5. But most of the time, you'll see this. On these, I've already written, you can see that I already wrote the genotype, but when we did this in class, I did not have this up here. So I explained to everybody that hitchhiker's thumb is what we're talking about. It's going to be represented with an H. And these are, if they're shaded half and half, you know that they are heterozygous because they're the carrier of this gene, but there's a dominant trait there to not show that, for the phenotype to not show that the gene is there. And so these two, if you were to do a Punnett square with heterozygous and heterozygous, you could get some homozygous dominant, you could get some homozygous recessive, and you can get some heterozygous. Well, if I did not show you what these genotypes were, if they were blank, you would be able to figure out this one easily, I think, because it's a carrier that's going to be a heterozygous, big H to little h. This one you should know, it's for sure going to be little h, because it is not just a carrier of the gene, but it's also showing the gene. And because you know that it's a little h, the only way that it can show is if they're both little h's. If there's a dominant trait there, then the dominant trait's going to show out. This one over here you might not know, and you can see it right there. I know you can see it in red, but you might not know what this one is. The way that we determine this is by looking at the offspring. So in this case, we've got an organism that is H homozygous dominant, and its parents you're just not sure because the parents could have donated each. It could have donated any mixture of it. So it could have been a heterozygous offspring, but it's not. This one is actually homozygous, and you can tell because it is not shaded at all. But there are some situations where you're going to see we'll practice these on the practice sheet, but you may have to figure out whether it is homozygous dominant or it's heterozygous. And to do so, you need to know, it helps to know what the other one is, but we decided if this one was unshaded and we're not sure about this one, we can deduce what this one is based on what the offspring are. So the only way that this one can be a carrier is if one of its parents has this recessive gene, and if this one is homozygous dominant, then the recessive gene must come from this one. So we would shade this one in, half of this one would be shaded in, and that's if you know what this genotype is, and if you know what the offspring are. You can use the offspring, or sometimes you can use the parent to figure out what the genotype is of that organism. So we'll do some practice. There's a sheet that kind of walks you through, and it makes you go through and practice each of the steps. So work on that, get that, and you're welcome. You look at other YouTube videos and try to see somebody else explain. But this is a pedigree.